Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace. Before I begin, please like, share, and subscribe my videos here on the YouTube page. And please feel free to leave some comments as well as continue to support some of the videos that I've produced here on the Pace Report. As you know, here on the Pace Report, I continue to introduce as well as profile musicians that have really been making a very important dent here in the New York jazz scene. And tonight, saxophonist Mike Lee is performing music from his second recording entitled Song for All of Us, which is co-produced by the legendary Lenny White. Now, as you might know, Lenny White just started a record label called IYOUWE Records, and this is one of the third artists on this label that he just released. Tonight, you're going to see highlights of his performance here at Smalls here in New York City, and I had a chance to break bread with him about his origins growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, him getting some of the very masterful information from another Cleveland native, jazz master, the great Joe Lovano, as well as talk about how he's bringing music to the educational front. As you might know, Mike is also a professor of jazz at Montclair State University in New Jersey. So sit back, relax, and enjoy highlights of Mr. Mike Lee performing music from his current record, Song for All of Us, live at Smalls, here on the Pace Report, here in New York City. You know, Mike, I got the CD a couple months ago through your publicist, Scott Thompson, who's handling this project. And I want to say that this is by far one of the best albums I've heard of 2019. You have really pulled some punches on here. In fact, the thing that I find very interesting about this record is you have a bevy of heavyweights playing on this record.
That's true. You know, it kind of hit me all at once when we did our first CD release party, which was at a place called Clement's Place in Newark. And I got up there on the bandstand, and my sidemen were Dave Stryker, Bruce Williams, Ed Hauer, Lenny White, you know, who are all amazing leaders, world-renowned musicians. And I was like, these guys are all here for me. And they played like they were there for me. And that's one of the things that was so mind-blowing about this record, you know.
And we got to add that this is the second project on Lenny White's label, which is IYOUWE, and Lenny is the co-producer of this record.
That's right. Yeah, that blew me away. I had done some things with Wallace Roney with Lenny White, first in the large orchestra that we were doing, the Universe Orchestra, doing the music of Wayne Shorter. And I believe you were at one. Yeah, I remember meeting you at that event at the Jazz Standard. And got to know Lenny a little bit. We went to Detroit together with a core from that band. We picked up Detroit Symphony people to fill out, but Wallace brought the core. And then I even did a few quintet and sextet tours with Wallace's band with Lenny in it. And we became friends, you know, which was, you know, always mind-blowing that someone you grew up listening to and idolized become someone you can just send a text to or call. So I remember being very nervous about asking him because, like, sure, we're friends, but can I ask him to play on my record? And I asked him to play on the record, and he said, you know, I'm starting my own label, right? And I was like, I didn't know that. He goes, yeah, well, let's do this. So I thought that was a pretty good answer. Yeah, I'll play on your record and I'll produce it. So that was a pretty amazing situation.
Now, Mike, you have played with some stalwarts in the industry, and we'll go into that in a second. But this is officially your very first release, and is this?
It's my first release in about 17 years under my own name. I did a couple of projects with a wonderful band I had with some friends about, boy, that's going on back almost a decade now, 9 to 11 years ago. We did a couple records with a band called New Tricks, which I co-led. But this is the first one since 2001, I think, that I put out under my own name.
What took so long?
It's interesting. A lot of the times when I first moved to New York and into my 30s and the time I was doing a lot of projects like this, I wasn't that busy playing in other people's bands. And I think I always wanted to be a sideman. I always wanted to be acknowledged by the musicians. I wanted to play with people like Wallace Roney and Lenny White and those kind of things. And that wasn't happening as frequently back then as it started to happen in the 2000s. And that's when I formed relationships with John Lee, the Dizzy Gillespie Orchestra, with Lawston Harris, who I work, 100 dates a year with at the Carlisle Hotel, Jimmy Heath, Oliver Lake. These kind of sideman gigs started coming in more regularly, and I found myself pretty busy doing that. So that was just my identity. I was raising a family, working as a sideman with some of the world's greatest artists, and I don't think I just didn't have the motivation to put something out under my own name.
Writing the compositions for this album, did it come naturally to you, or did it take some time, or did life bump you a couple of times on the head and you had to write some things?
Well, I think I could probably say all of the above to that one. The nice thing about not having put out a record in so long was there was a lot of material to choose from. A lot of these tunes were written a long time ago, and I just knew I always liked them and I wanted to record them. So that was an advantage to having waited so long. But some of the things were written, like the title track, "Song for All of Us," was written in 2016 after the general election. And I felt the country was in such chaos, and we were divided into camps where we were playing, and it's like, I think there was a feeling that, well, we're on one side as artists and musicians, and there's another side, and I'm like, that's not our function as music. Our function is to play music for the people, wherever they are, whatever level of enlightenment or lack thereof they're at, we're there to make things better. And I think that's when I started to form some serious opinions about music being essential and not just a frivolous thing that we do as an adjunct to the quote-unquote real work of founding an economy and producing products and providing goods and services. I think it's a higher plane of understanding, and it's really crucial part of our human existence.
You know, it's funny you say that, because I spoke with Cyrus Chestnut a couple of years ago when I interviewed him, and one of the things that is really, really missing from today's music is that music from the 70s and the 60s, it was more real. The reflections of what was going on in the world kind of caused people to become reflective and write on things that were very, very crucial, that were really dividing this country, like you're saying that we are right now.
Right. Yeah, I think there was more of a sense of the arts being linked with the movements that were taking place at that time in the 60s and 70s. I think because of corporate interests and things that are going on now, we can't have an anti-war song on the radio. So I think there are limitations. One nice thing about being in the jazz world, which is, people are often decrying what a small percentage of the overall music market we take up. One of the things is we're kind of under the radar, and I don't think there's many people that really care if we're writing something that goes this way or the other way in terms of anti-war, anti-oppression, or whatever our message is. I think we have a little bit more freedom in that regard.
You grew up in Cleveland, and also another famous saxophonist by the name of Mr. Joe Lovano comes from your neck of the
He
woods.
sure does.
Tell me about growing up in Cleveland and how you were exposed to the music.
We had a very nice arts program in our public schools. I grew up in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, and I now live in Montclair, New Jersey, and they're very similar types of situations. Very diverse, very arts-oriented, wide spectrum diversity in terms of economics, and so, we were exposed to more than, it wasn't homogenous in terms of who we were exposed to. So, culturally we were seeing a lot of different things, and there was such a strong musical emphasis. Cleveland Orchestra people, most of them are raising their kids there. So the people like my wife, who's a classical violinist, father taught at the Cleveland Institute of Music. There was a lot of that situation going on with a lot of strong music. And so when I started to study saxophone, my teacher was writing an improvisation method. And so he started working me on that, and I just was like, this is amazing. And I had a friend who gave me a couple of cassette tapes with, some vocalists, Ella Fitzgerald, Carmen McRae, and I listened to these 24/7, and just that exposure to it was amazing. And then I guess around 14, 15, I started to go out and hear the local musicians that were playing. There were some wonderful musicians in the area. So, it was back in a time when you could still go hear live music any night of the week in the Midwest, and be out late and hear music. Cleveland Heights, where I grew up, is right up the hill from the east side of Cleveland, and there were still a few clubs left from the era, like organ clubs. A great organist named Eddie Backus would play, and I used to go down and sit in with him. And there's a place called the Lancer Steakhouse, and it was from the community that jazz was born. And I remember the great running back Jim Brown from the Cleveland Browns would hang out there every week. I mean, this was black culture, and we'd be I'd be one of the few people that looked like I did going into that situation and playing with great musicians. A guy named Kenny Davis was a trumpet player, still is back in Cleveland, that I learned a lot from, and it was a great environment. I think one of the things about that environment that was unique at that time, there wasn't a jazz school associated with it. So if you were going to play jazz music, you really need to play with people that were playing it, and go to the clubs where it was happening. And I remember going to places where I had to knock on the window, and someone would pull back and let you in, in order to go in there and play jam sessions. So Cleveland was an amazing place. As you mentioned, Joe Lovano was from there, so when he would come back to town, we'd always get very excited. When I moved to New York, I studied with Joe for a few years and ended up touring a bunch with Joe in the 90s, and that was a great introduction to the kind of international scene.
What did you learn from Joe as far as what did he teach you? What were some of the things that you picked up on your technique?
Joe was very much about rhythm, listening to the drums, phrasing, getting away from playing mechanically, and being very free with the bar line. Hearing the, to me, I mean, I interpret it now, even though he never would have put it this way, hearing the polyrhythm in the music, hearing the different parts, the different threes and the fours and the twos that compare and contrast and are going on simultaneously. He was very great about emphasizing that and rhythmic variety.
Who were some of your musical influences, both on the horn and just in the music area?
Well, I would love to be very original. I can't answer that question without mentioning John Coltrane, Charlie Parker. Sonny Stitt was huge.
Everyone likes Sonny Stitt. As of the last decade, last 15 years, people are starting to talk about Sonny Stitt now.
Well, I think Sonny Stitt, to me, what he did, well, first of all, I was a tenor player. So I'm trying to learn the music of Charlie Parker. And Charlie Parker's music, to me, is more accented. It's more vernacular. There's isms in it. There's little things. And it's much easier to learn that through the way Sonny Stitt played in a more I don't want to say articulate because no one's more articulate than Charlie Parker.
He was more bluesy.
More bluesy, but also more specific technically. Like you can you can really stop and all the notes are there. Whereas Charlie Parker might play a phrase and the notes are implied. So once you've learned them from Sonny Stitt, you can hear what Charlie Parker is implying. So he was really a way in for me.
That's crazy because my grandfather, he was a real big Gene Ammons fan, and he loved Sonny Stitt. And another thing too that Sonny Stitt could do, he could play both instruments. He was a triple threat.
Yeah, he sure was. Yeah, he was a great altoist as well. After really studying his music and learning his actual vocabulary and lines, and then going on and studying George Coleman. And it's a completely different approach sound-wise, but I swear the lines he got are verbatim from Sonny Stitt. And certain periods of Train. Train was definitely checking out Sonny Stitt and the way he would connect certain chromatic lines and make it work. So Sonny Stitt was a great foundation. I remember talking to the great Jimmy McGarry, who was a tenor player that lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I went to school for a couple of years. And he talked about, being in New York around Charlie Parker. But he said if he wanted to learn a tune, he would get Sonny Stitt's recording because it was so clear what every chord was, the way he would play.
I'm listening to you, and you got like an old soul. Because anybody who brings up Sonny Stitt is you all right in my book. Another thing too, we're talking about Sonny Stitt. Sonny Stitt could play ballads. Mm-hmm. He could play the blues. He could do soul jazz. Yeah. He kind of was this multi-dimensional saxophonist.
Absolutely, very versatile. The way he would have tenor battles with Gene Ammons, and then the way he would play with Dizzy Gillespie and Sonny Rollins on rhythm changes. Redefine the way tenor players play rhythm changes ever since that happened. So yeah, he was incredibly versatile, and brought it to the people. Played the blues, played with organ, amazing. So I'm so fortunate to have all this diversity of experiences from playing, in Jimmy Heath's orchestra, Dizzy Gillespie Orchestra, playing with Oliver Lake, playing with Dave Stryker's organ group, or Rodham Schwartz, great organ player from New Jersey. All those different ways of playing are required of me, and playing with Lawston Harris, which is my most frequent employer. Playing in a drummerless place in a hotel bar, playing real swinging, beautiful music with a singer. That all those different textures, I need to be able to do all that to stay employed, and that's something that Sonny Stitt was a master of. Could be himself, but be right in any situation.
And I also got to give another plug out to Cleveland, Tad Dameron, and also the great Vanessa Rubin.
I wish I had played more with Vanessa. She was a couple years older than me, so she was gone by the time I was on the scene. I actually played a bunch of gigs with her brother, I believe, at one point. But I played, the musicians I played with, there was a great pianist back then named Neil Creaky. Lamar Gaines, from what I know, is still playing amazing bass out there. There was a drummer named Lawrence Jacktown Jackson, who was an amazing drummer, and all those guys she came up around as well. So I got the Willie Smith, the great alto saxophonist that Joe Lovano played in his octet, and those arrangements became Joe Lovano's nonet recordings.
Nonet, right.
That's the first one was Willie Smith's recording. So I played the same book that Joe played after he left, and it was an amazing scene. I know Vanessa has an album out right now that has my Tad Dameron's music, that has my buddy Bruce Williams, also plays on my record, is on that as well. Bruce is getting played on the radio a lot these days. Yeah.
have to ask you, you are a professor, you teach music at Montclair State University, and the band stage is one thing, but the educational component is another. What is it that you're instilling upon the next generation of musicians as they enter the band place as well as the real world?
That's a great question. What I try not to do is to have the message be too different. So, when I here at Smalls tonight and I'm playing for the people and trying to relate from my experience based on this music that comes from the Black American experience, and I'm trying to, project those values musically, I don't really want to be that different when I'm in front of students, whether it's one-on-one or when I'm with an ensemble. I think that one of the reasons that I've been successful with students is that I see them as how they're going to sound 6 months from now, and I assign them music and give them challenges based on who they're going to be, and let them flounder for a little bit at the beginning, because I find a lot of times we teach to the level that students are at, and we don't see them as fully realized human beings. We don't give them the respect as young musicians that can handle more than even they think they can. So, the other thing is I make sure they're staying and listening to the recordings. They're going out and hearing live music. They're taking on the elements that are important to a well-rounded jazz education, because learning only in school gets criticized, as it probably deservedly so in some instances. But it's how we learn now. There was a lot more opportunities for me to play in the 70s and 80s than there are for students now, unless you live in New York, and then all bets are off because you have nothing but opportunities.
But Jersey now, where in your neck of the woods, there's a lot of jazz clubs, and there's some people that are really kind of sticking their neck out, keeping this music alive.
There are, I understand that the great club in my town, Montclair, Trumpets, is up for sale. So we're just all hoping that someone gets on that and buys it who wants to keep it as it's been as a jazz venue. We found a lot of other venues. This place, Clemens Place in Newark, is great. I think a lot of the potential customers in West Orange and Montclair are a little worried about going to Newark when, if they just would go, they'd see how beautiful it is and how wonderful, and especially that room is amazing. So there's some stuff going on. The thing about Jersey is there's the musicians. All of us who work in New York and are raising families in Jersey are out there and would just as soon play a gig out there as to make it across the bridge or through the tunnel. So there's a lot going on. Jazz House Kids is another place I teach. We've had a lot of success with students there and reaching all types of students, not just from suburbs, but we make sure we are reaching out to students in Patterson and Newark and keeping the music available for everybody who has an interest. And organizations like that, I think, really help stoke the whole interest in and love of jazz. Parents of young jazz musicians will go to your gigs. It's part of the economy. I think we have to not look at jazz education as separate from jazz performance. It's all about a message. We want a message of love and togetherness, of beauty, of expression, of personal growth and investigation. We want that to be our message on the bandstand and with our students. And I think as long as we keep that connected and don't start pigeonhole musicians and teachers as one or the other, or pigeonhole yourself, saying, "Oh, I'm only respected as a teacher, so I have to do that." And I think that's what's a problem. But if you think of all the great musicians, that love to teach. Dizzy Gillespie was the greatest jazz educator that ever walked the earth.
Look at Jimmy Heath at 92 years young, still doing it.
Absolutely, yeah. And playing in his band is like, I'm a student again. I feel like I'm earning another degree when I sit down in his orchestra.
Jimmy, we have to acknowledge, his orchestra right now is a necessity because everybody that's playing in that band, including you and I think Sherelle Cassidy plays from time to time. All the musicians.
And just to be clear, I play in it from time to time. There's a young man named Sam Dillon who plays the book more frequently that I sometimes sub in now. But there was a minute there where I got to do many gigs in a row with him, including weeks at the Blue Note and 90th birthday celebrations at Lincoln Center and Kennedy Center. So I got a lot out of that.
A lot of those musicians, including yourself, once there's no more Jimmy Heath, that spirit, that knowledge, and also the vernacular, it's going to the next generation of musicians. And that's a heavy load to carry because Jimmy was a prolific instructor, composer, and band leader.
Jimmy is and was part of every movement that happened over the last 70 years in jazz. I will say that if we're talking about who's in his band and this music keep going, we have to talk about Antonio Hart.
Yeah.
I was hanging out with Antonio just a week ago tonight. He held the Vando Jam, and he and I are both Van Doren artists. And he had all his students in there from Queens, and just going down there and watching him give those lessons. So many lessons on the bandstand to give. You can teach someone all day under fluorescent lights in the classroom, and you can get a lot of good knowledge that way. But getting up on the bandstand and having someone having Antonio Hart tell a young saxophone player enough when he goes to play another chorus, like that's a lesson that they need to hear. Or just go up there and say, okay, we're going to play Red Cross by Charlie Parker, and they all look at him like, what? Red Cross, Charlie Parker. And so he and I play the melody, and and I'm pulling the kids' quote. This is a great line. You have to learn it in 12 keys. You want to do this next thing. So, just seeing Antonio in that situation. Thank you so much.
I just met Minnie, your daughter.
Yes.
Music runs in your family, and that's a beautiful thing. And your son's going to be coming here, or your son is going to play tonight. What is it about the music of them coming up watching you and your wife play? What was it about them that just said, okay, we're going to play this. We're going to pursue this?
Well, I've thought about this a lot. I mean, I'm very fortunate. All three of my kids love this music and play it very well. My oldest, Julien, who's going to be playing with us tonight, already performed multiple times with Wynton Marsalis and the Charles Mingus Orchestra, and many gigs with, all of his contemporaries, people like Emmett Cohen and Evan Sherman and Russell Hall, and all these amazing young musicians that he's hanging out with and playing with.
Emmett just won the national pianist competition.
Yeah, we had Emmett. Emmett was taking classes with me when he was 12, 13 years old, and playing with, at the time Julien was 8 or 9, and I remember making Julien play with Emmett, and Emmett was like, "Oh, I got to play with these little kids," and then came out, a little kid could play. So we've known these guys for a long time. Same with Evan. I've known him since he was 13 years old. It's a great community. I think that the thing that my wife and I are both professional musicians. She's from a long line of musicians, actually. Her father and grandmother are both musicians. So on her side of the family, my kids are fourth generation musicians. But we want our kids to practice when they were little kids. They would practice their instrument. We were never going to force anyone to into a career, but you have to do your math homework, you have to do your science homework, and you have to practice your instrument. And by the time they got to an age where they were interacting socially at jazz camps, for instance, or classical camps in my daughter's case, and start to get the attention of the older students that wanted to play with them, it was really magic. It was really, they love it. They suddenly find themselves in a situation where they're good at it. And my wife always had the saying, she said, they'll love what they're good at. And it's true. If you can go and you can communicate this music and express and interact with people and interact with the adults around them. I mean, they're growing up around Billy Hart and Christian McBride and Bruce Williams, Oliver Lake. These are all people in the neighborhood. This is their community, and so I think they feel really connected to the music. I think they have a strong sense of discipline, and it's kind of a family business. It's what we do.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace. I'd like to personally thank the talented Mike Lee for his time. Make sure you go out and support his brand new CD, Song for All of Us, which is now available on CD Baby, Amazon.com, as well as iTunes. Also, for more information about Mike's upcoming club dates, as well as to order his CD online, you can also visit his website at MikeLeeJazz.com. I'd like to personally thank the staff and management at Smalls for their warm hospitality. Also, please visit my website, thepacereport.com, for my weekly column as well as my past segments. Also, please like, share, and subscribe to the Pace Report on YouTube, and also feel free to leave your comments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.
Thank you.